Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new video. I've just got hold of this Hayter Harrier 56 Pro, which is really the best of the best. This is the best professional mower in the professional range. It was free, kind of. I sort of got it in return for doing some work for somebody, but there is an issue. The previous owner tells me that it makes a funny noise, and I think everybody knows that a mower should not make a funny noise. So we're going to have to figure out exactly what that funny noise is, but it was enough for the previous owner to want to get rid of it. So I'm sort of expecting the worst. It's got a Briggs & Stratton engine, so it shouldn't be too difficult to get parts if we need any. It is missing the grass box, so that is a bit of a concern. But I think everything else is in pretty good condition. There doesn't seem to be anything too damaged or cracked. All the levers are here. Just looking underneath. Yeah, looks to be complete. We've got the blade, we've got the blade dish, the roller. It actually doesn't look like it's done that much work, really. So let's start it up, if we can do. We've got petrol. And check the oil. Yeah, just have to get a rag, I think, to wipe that. Yep, so we do have enough oil, but it does look a bit dirty. And an interesting place to have an air filter. I'm hoping that's not off this one. No, it's a spare, a very dirty spare. Right, so the spark plug is tight in there, it's not loose. Sometimes I get these and they're about to come flying out, it's like a bullet. And yeah, the blade bolt is also not about to come out. So let's see if it runs. Yeah, definitely some kind of knocking. Interesting. Okay, we'll see what we can see. I have just removed the spark plug, and also when I was attempting to start it, it actually wouldn't start without some carburetor spray in the carburetor. So either the carburetor is a bit dirty, or we do have a bit of an issue with this auto choke. Now this linkage moves as the exhaust, the muffler, heats up. So there's a bit of wax in there, and that will melt, and that will actually move this linkage. So the choke is on when the engine is cold, and as this heats up, it transfers heat, melts the wax, and this lever will move to open the choke. Because of course you do not want the choke on whilst the engine is nice and warm and running okay. because it won't be running okay. Anyway, let's try and find the source of this knocking. Now, I haven't eliminated anything underneath yet either, so I do need to make sure I check underneath before we go any further with this. Can't actually hear... Oh, there we go. Just as I was going to say, I can't actually hear it. I heard it, and it did feel... I could feel it as well through the flywheel. But let's have a look underneath as well. Now this blade and disc should come off as one unit. Or not. There we go. Of course, if we do need to dismantle this machine, the engine, I'm a bit concerned because I do know that the pulleys under here are sort of a mixture between plastic and metal, a combination. Like, it's not one plastic and one metal, they're actually metal and plastic in one pulley. And if they're stuck, it's very difficult to get them off without breaking them. Yeah, I wonder if this is the original blade. I've seen quite a few sharpens. But it is a professional machine, so if that is the first blade, then yeah, it hasn't done that much, but there's not really any way of knowing. It is 2021, I think, this machine. So there is a plastic insert under here, we can remove that. So we have the main clutch here for the belt engagement, the main pulley, and you can see there's the belt. It actually looks very good. Probably doesn't even need to be replaced, which means I'm going to have to remove all this. We'll have a good look. So I'm going to remove the fuel tank, the carburetor, and I'm going to suck the oil out so I can flip the entire mower upside down. That way it'll be much easier to remove the clutch and the pulleys. Okay, so I have found the problem. The problem actually does lie with this, well, at least the top half. So we do have this plate here, and that should not move like that. That noise you hear is the noise that we were hearing when it was running. It's rattling around. The reason why is because the welds on both sides have failed. But not only have they failed, but they've actually disappeared. You can see there was absolutely zero penetration. It's actually hard to believe there's even a weld there. just there on both sides. Look at that. It's quite hard to show on video, but the weld has not penetrated at all into this shaft section. And I guess it hasn't actually really penetrated at all into the plate either. So this has failed after probably not that many hours use. The bearings seem absolutely perfect. Really smooth. But that rattling, that is our problem. Now, obviously I could just replace this and then refit it, but that would be a pretty boring and fast video. So I think I'm going to still rebuild the engine, despite the engine being very new, because, well, you never know. We might discover another problem, and well, it's always going to benefit from a nice overhaul. So yeah, we're going to go for an engine rebuild. Anyway, the engine is held in with 3 bolts, one here, and one under here. That one I could potentially get a spanner onto, but if I can't, then this bar will have to be removed as well. I'm just going to put a block of wood underneath the engine so that it's not just hanging there, because that will probably damage the threads if I just leave it hanging. And there is the engine. So there's a shim on there, mustn't lose that, keep that safe. And there's always a bit of oil residue left over. The oil slinger, which is also the governor, that looks to be okay. Not really expecting any issues with that anyway. They're usually a very reliable part in these Briggs & Stratton engines. And then we have the plastic camshaft. Now, people always seem to be extremely amazed about plastic camshafts in these engines. They've been doing it for years. Yeah, obviously it's nicer to have metal, but yeah, plastic's been around in these things for a long time, and I don't really see it going away, to be honest. Now, there is a timing mark. I'm just going to turn the engine over until I align the timing mark, and the main reason for this is just so it's easier to remove the camshaft. Otherwise, at least one of the valves will be open and it will bind. So there we go, the timing marks are aligned. Now the valve tappets may well fall out. Oh, they're being held up. And yeah, again, I'm not expecting an issue with the camshaft. Actually looks to be in good condition. Valve tappets, as mentioned, I won't mix them up. Push rods just come through. Let's remove that. Let's remove the crankshaft. Now I have already measured the crank pin journal, and there is absolutely no wear at all in that. That is absolutely spot on, and that has got a measurement of 1.123 inches. So we have it, that is just the connecting rod and piston, big end back together. I can see up there, and I can see there's a lot of carbon on the head, so that is going to have to be decarbonized. Now is a good time just to test our auto choke. So I'm going to gently heat on this plate here, not directly onto it, and hopefully we'll see this lever move. There we go, it's starting to move. So I think we know that works. And now to disassemble the rest of the engine. So I've actually just done a video on one of these, just a slightly smaller version, but it's exactly the same idea. Underneath here we'll have the breather plate. This is the plate. So yeah, we'll have the breather under there with silicone, which is sealing that. And then we'll also have the exhaust, which will come off. We can take the head off, the rockers, and the push rods and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite simple. The bore is looking absolutely spotless. You can still see the original cross hatching, and really it looks like the engine has barely done anything. It's clearly been doing some work because we do have all this carbon in the head. So I'm just going to make sure when I remove the valves that there isn't a leaking valve seal. It likely only has one. Actually, I think only the intake on this engine has a valve seal. I'll also just measure the bore. It's perfect in that direction. Again, perfect. We can get this all cleaned up. We'll get the valves removed. It's very easy to remove the valves on these small engines. We first of all have the cap, and then with these ones you don't even need a valve spring compressor. It's that easy, and then the valve will just slide out. But yeah, we do have a lot of crust. Lots and lots of crust, which needs to be dealt with. Because we don't want that breaking off into the cylinder, because that will scratch the bore. Valves removed, and as you can see we do have a seal on the intake side. We don't have one on the exhaust side. And there is some oil on there, that's the exhaust. Just in there, there's no seal. Yeah, so that's interesting. And looking at the back of the valve, that's very oily. Look at that. So I'd say that valve seal, valve stem seal, is leaking, and certainly worth replacing at this stage, because look at the crust, like I keep saying, it's crusty! This slippery customer that just fell off is the gasket, of course. It's a very, very rubbery gasket on these. They do, well, I've had one leak, the previous one I did leaked. I don't think this one actually was leaking, but as I've bought the gasket kit, I'll just fit a new one. But that probably could be cleaned up and reused. I'll keep it as an emergency gasket. So yeah, it's no bad thing actually that we are in this engine, because it does need to have that valve stem seal replacing. Otherwise it is just going to keep burning oil, probably more and more excessively. As I'm still waiting for that seal, we'll just leave that one in there for now. Get the head gasket removed, and we'll get it all cleaned up, get all the carbon taken out of there, get it ready for the new seal and the new head gasket. Much cleaner. The gasket kit has arrived, part number 597320. That's got everything that we need in there, including the new intake valve stem seal, oil seal, and that is what it looks like. So I need to remove the old one. You can see we've got the spring on there. Yeah, so obviously you need to be careful removing the old one. We don't want to damage the valve guide. I've seen videos actually of people sticking pliers and sharp objects inside the seal, and it's just not a good idea because you could damage the guide. So I just like to pull from the outside. Of course, this is a lawnmower, not Starship, so we don't need to be unbelievably careful. It's just a case of releasing it from the guide. And there it is. No damage done. Just give it a quick wipe around in there. And then we'll be ready to fit the new one. I'm going to put a bit of reassembly oil onto the valve guide. This should just aid the fitting. Don't want to be forcing it too much. Okay, obviously putting oil in here is going to produce a bit of smoke when it first starts, but nothing significant. And also, before we put the valve stem through the seal, very good idea to lubricate that as well. I've seen people just fit the valves straight in, and that could create a cut, or it could just damage it. So we don't want to be doing that. Do not want that to fall out again. There we go. So once that is aligned, we can then just fit it onto the guide. I'm just using a socket, of course, a socket which fits only around the outside. We do not want to touch the area where the spring is, the sealing part essentially. And there we have it. The valve stem seal is fitted. Okay, so it is time to refit the valves, and then we can refit the head. Regular viewers of my channel will know that I always relap the valves if necessary, but these ones have done nearly no work and they just look so new. I've cleaned them, they're all clean, so they're ready to just go back in. They do not need relapping. So intake valve first, as I said, lots of reassembly oil on the stem so that we're not cutting the seal. So let's just very carefully, very, very carefully pop this in here. There we go. And now, back to the engine with new head gasket out of the gasket kit. There we go, brand new. Get that onto there, get the head fitted, torqued, and then it'll be a case of putting the push rods in and then setting the valve clearances. Oh, here's quality control. Come on, Hoggy, away with you. Looking at the chart, it is 24 Newton meters for the head bolts. I'm not going to fully tighten straight away. When I do the final tighten, I will be going in a diagonal pattern. Okay, let's try and reach 24. Back to this one again. It's quite hard holding the engine and torquing it. There we go. Now for push rods, green for intake, orange for exhaust. They're the colours that I put on them. Exhaust is on the top for this engine. They do vary. I have put a bit of oil on the other end. So probably just have to slacken these nuts off a bit to get the rockers actually onto them. And now to set the clearances. I'm going to do them both to 5 thousandths of an inch, which is within spec, although it is on the tighter side. Let's have a delve deeper into this goodie bag. Ah, the gasket for the rocker. So yes, that can go onto here. There is actually a specific way that will go on this engine. There is a little notch here and there is a notch on the gasket. So that has to go on like that. Sits nicely in there. Just cleaned the rocker cover, so it's ready to refit. It only goes one way. And then we have the 4 bolts. I think everything else from now on is going to be fairly self-explanatory. So I'm going to just continue with the reassembly, and then I'll probably speak to you again when we get to the carburetor. We are now at that stage, ready to fit the carburetor, and this is the original carburetor. I've just drained the bowl and it did have some water in it, but I've decided I'm not even going to keep this for this engine. I'm going to get a more reliable carburetor, the new version, and it seems that they have improved the choke and they're not the most reliable when starting from cold. So I'm hoping that having the metal butterfly valve is going to be more reliable than having this flimsy looking plastic one. Yes, I don't know exactly what the issue is, but I get the feeling it's that it just doesn't choke the engine enough when it's cold, so it just doesn't start that well. Hopefully this is going to change that, we'll see. I've just flushed out the fuel tank, which also did have water in it, not too much, just a little bit, but that has been cleaned inside and out. Probably won't be able to see in too well, or at all, but yeah. I promise that's all clean and dry in there. So we can now fit this onto the new carburetor, onto the engine, and then it'll be just a case of putting the top cover on. Now, looking at the Recoil cover, it looks to be good. All seems to work. However, there's a bit of fraying on the pull cord, just a bit. It would probably keep working for a long time, but just to play it safe, I will replace the pull cord. And here is the new one. So just need to unwind this one first, and then we can clamp the Recoil mechanism into position. There we go, so you can see that's how it pulls through. That's the old pull cord out, but we do want to retain the pull handle Yeah, it looks like that's probably, well, I wouldn't say it's been under the mower, but maybe a dog's been chewing on it actually. It's got little bites taken out of it. Oh well, not to worry. To prevent the end from fraying, you can see it's a bit frayed where it's been cut. Just going to heat that up at the end very carefully. That's melted the end. And then the same for the other end, and then we can put it onto the recoil. So that's the handle done. Now we need to feed it through and then tie a knot. So there we have a nice clean underside of the deck. Obviously there is a bit of paint loss, but that doesn't matter. That's just inevitable with lawnmowers. But before I can reassemble this, I have actually noticed there is a bit of wear on this plate here. This is where a spring attaches to, and you can see it's already almost worn through. It's not even old, but it's already almost worn through. That plate, luckily, is readily available and very cheap, just a couple of pounds. So I'm going to put this new one on so that we don't have any issues with the spring just breaking free. If it was an expensive plate, which would be a bit ridiculous, I could just weld it. But at a cost of £2, there's no point. We might as well just put a brand new one onto there. So just remove the nut, take this carriage bolt out, and then put the new plate in. Okay, so keep the washer in place. I'll just check the bearing actually. Yep, no problems there. Might just give it a quick wipe. Just to keep any grime out of there. It is a sealed bearing though, so shouldn't be a problem, but grit can still sometimes get past the seal. Okay, there we go. Put the washer back in, put the belt on. Of course, the belt does need to go around the inside of this guide. So just need to make sure it is in there. There we go. Carriage bolt in. Put the nut back on. And there we go. Alright, so just double check the belt. I don't think it's done much work. Looks to be in really good condition, so that does not need to be replaced. It's a Hayter belt made in Germany. Okay, let's get the engine refitted. So the new part has arrived, and believe it or not, the weld still looks pretty poor. Yeah, that looks bad. I'm hardly surprised that the first one failed. Look at this. Now, I'm not a welding expert, but that looks really not that good. And the two sides are so different as well. Like that is a very different weld to that. So interesting. I think probably some work wants to be put into these from Hayter, because there's the original one, and we know those welds have failed pretty early on. So what I need to do is press this one out. It's the entire shaft that goes into the bearings. As I said, the bearings are really good. Don't think they've done much work. So we can then just put the new one straight into there, and then we can build it up onto the machine. That should be the rattling problem solved. So that's that. So there we go, that is everything attached again. I've also adjusted the cable so that the brake is actually contacting the pulley when it should do. That's the blade brake. And everything else looks to be absolutely fine. The belts are good, springs look good, everything's nice and tight. So we can now put the black cover on, which I have just cleaned, but it does actually have a lot of, well, they're gouges from where the blade has been rotating and spinning debris, stones and all that sort of stuff. And it's just, yeah, left this very textured finish, but it doesn't really matter. Certainly not going to affect the way it works, so I'm going to attach that to there, and then we can put a new blade on. So this new blade does actually look very different to the original blade. Well, I call it the original blade, the one which was on it. It's not original because it doesn't actually have Hayter stamped on it anywhere. This one says Hayter. It's a genuine blade, part number 1342671. And this has got literally nothing. There is something. It's not Hayter. Made in Germany. Interesting. Very interesting. But yeah, the parts list for this mower returns this blade, that part number, so well, it must be this one, and there were no others listed. So this has got the big lifters, great for bagging. So we need a dish on here. Just put that blade bolt through there. Yeah, we've got the dish, so that goes in line with those tabs. And it's amazing how many people fit blades upside down. Basically, if you can see the cutting edge, then it's on wrong. The cutting edge should always face the underside of the deck. So yeah, anyway, there we go. Okay, I do see a problem here. So, the new blade is catching on that plastic. Now this is, and I've just double checked, the correct blade for this motor. So, this must be damaged. You see, if this was a restoration, I wouldn't even have this problem because these plastics would have been replaced. But what I can see is in this gap here, we do have a lot of debris. So I don't know if that's forcing the plastic up on this corner. There's obviously a big chunk missing as well from this corner as well, but that shouldn't be the reason for that, because obviously this shouldn't be as high. This should be, I'm guessing, flush. I reckon this would have been sitting in this recess just here. So I think I'm going to have to start picking away. Yep, this is grass that's gone in here and hardened. And well, I think I'm probably going to have to remove the plastic, to be honest. Yes, we have got a bolt up here behind the roller, and then the roller has to move using the height adjustment lever. And then we have another one here, and I think we have the same on the underside. Yeah, so that's not even close to brushing anymore. I'm very happy to leave that as it is. I think it was the stick. The stick seems to be the main reason for it, although the stick probably wouldn't have got in if there wasn't a chunk missing. I don't know how much is actually missing here. If it doesn't go flush to the corner, I would be very surprised. But anyway, there we go. So yeah, I think we're done under here. That all seems good. As we know, the gearbox is fine, belts are good, roller's good. Because yeah, as I keep saying, I don't think it's done that much work. I really don't. Obviously it's done some work, but it hasn't done like a ridiculous number of hours. Next step is to make sure it runs. We'll put some oil and some fuel in it, and then if it does all work perfectly, I can fit a new Hayter badge on the front, and I'll be able to get a new grass box. I have searched for grass boxes. There's no used ones available, so it's going to have to be a new one. But this is going to be like a new machine anyway. It's had a full engine rebuild. Perfect, right on the mark. I also do have the new spark plug as well. Now that we know that the engine runs, I can order the grass box and I can replace the decal on the front. So let's get that fitted first of all. Yeah, new grass boxes are really expensive. Over £100. And there we have it. Obviously this is not a full restoration, so yes, we do still have lots of scuffs and scrapes, but that is just the way it is. It's a used machine. We're still very early on in the year, so let's go and see if there's any grass to cut. It's all working really well. I'm sure this will be a fantastic mower for somebody. As it turns out, it was just the one part underneath, but it did benefit from having the head removed because it did have a leaking valve stem seal, so definitely worth the rebuild, although not 100% necessary. Thank you so much for watching everybody, hopefully you enjoyed it, and until next time, see you again very soon.